From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 58. This is going to be a non-traditional episode in the absolute best way possible because instead of just having one guest, we've got a bunch. This episode was born out of actually a text message exchange I had with Adam Ottavino, a relief pitcher for the New York Yankees, as we were thinking about ways that we can use this downtime in baseball to get better. We started throwing around the idea of creating a roundtable discussion, and given how Adam pitches and looking at some of our clients, we had a lot of guys who were throwing high-level two-seams at the professional level. So we decided we're going to put our heads together to round up a good crew and nerd out on it for a while. So today we've got Blake Trinan, Corey Kluber, Mike Soroka, Brandon Kinsler, and Steve Cishek on the call. We're also joined by Brian Kaplan, our pitching coordinator at CSP Florida, and Mark Lowy, our associate pitching coordinator at CSP Florida. A lot of people say that two-seam fastballs are dying in baseball, and certainly the trends and usage are that's the case, but we're going to work hard today to revive it. So we're in for a really good show. This is also a cool show because it's a video call, not just an audio call. So you can go and check it out on YouTube and actually see the guys bust each other's chops and exchange some ideas in a video format. So it's a little bit more engaging. If you're a baseball pitcher, you know that keeping your arm healthy is essential. But with high training volumes on top of participation in games, that's not always easy. Overuse is a significant problem for players at every level of competition right now. Certainly we see elbow and shoulder injuries as some of the most common overuse injuries in baseball. At the professional level, an ulnar collateral ligament of the elbow injury can result in an average of 17.2 months out of competition. For youth players, overuse is also a predominant mechanism of injury. If you miss out on that much time, you're also missing out on a lot of development. So really, at the end of the day, there are three ways we can combat overuse. First, you can reduce workload, and certainly there have been a lot of research studies out there on pitch counts. Second, and the theme of this podcast, is that you can build a significant level of fitness to prepare yourself. However, a third key approach that's often overlooked is that you can work to improve your recovery so that you can safely display the fitness that you've built day in and day out. And that's really where Mark Pro is an effective tool. Some athletes will even use it to warm up their arms before they throw. Mark Pro is a cutting-edge EMS device that uses patented technology to create non-fatiguing muscle activation. And this is what sets it apart from other recovery tools. Muscle activation with Mark Pro facilitates each stage of the body's natural recovery process, similar to active recovery, but without the extra effort and muscular fatigue. Athletes can use it for as long as they need to ensure a more full and quick recovery between training or games. With its portability and ease of use, players can use Mark Pro while traveling between games or while relaxing at home. We even have players that use it all the time on team flights to help them bounce back. We have plenty of pro athletes that use this, and players from every Major League Baseball team use it. Put Mark Pro to the test for yourself and take advantage of the great deal they have set up for our listeners through the end of May. Just head to markpro.com and use promo code Cressey at checkout for 20% off your order. Again, that's markpro.com, markpro.com, and use the promo code Cressey, Cressey, at checkout to get 20% off your order through the end of May. All right, everybody, welcome. We're going to do a two-seam roundtable. Like I said before we got on air, the rules are that there are no rules. Before we start, I think it's important that I welcome my official co-anchor here. This is Adam Ottavino's broadcasting debut as a co-host on the Elite Baseball Development Podcast. Adam, are you nervous?
A little bit. I wouldn't say too much though.
I think you're going to handle it. You're more well equipped than any of us. You got the microphone, you got the true headset. Is that a recording studio at your house?
No, this is my office. I have never lived in this house until the quarantine, but just got it set up. Feeling good about it. So we're going to give it a whirl here.
All right. So right now we've got Blake Trinan. That was Adam Ottavino, New York Yankees. We've got Blake Trinan, Los Angeles Dodgers, even though you have not thrown a true pitch for the Los Angeles Dodgers yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, one spring training game. There we go.
There you go. And you are currently in Washington State?
Yeah, Walla Walla. It's
Nice.
actually really nice out here, so
Very nice.
Quarantine and treatment is good.
And don't you guys will be seeing the visual of this. He comes up as Katie on Zoom. That is his lovely wife, who is probably taking care of their two little hooligans so that you
Yep.
can do this. So thank you, Katie. We got Brian Kaplan, CSP pitching coordinator at our Florida facility. He's going to be jumping in and offering some nerd speak and asking some questions to kind of move the discussion along. We've got Brandon Kinsler in Las Vegas. Brandon is, let's see, you coming up here? Speak up, dude.
Huh?
Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
This is the point where you chime
I
in.
didn't know I was supposed to talk.
Brandon's a Miami Marlin now. Next to Brandon, we've got Mark Lowy, our assistant pitching coordinator at our Florida facility. He and Cap work hand in hand on a regular basis. We've got Steve Cishek, who is a whopping, 5 doors down from me in my neighborhood right now. Steve is the Chicago White Sox and the guy who hasn't thrown a pitch for his current team.
Yes.
The man in the shadow next to him is Corey Kluber, another veteran of the CSP podcast who is in cold Massachusetts right now.
Yeah, it's not warm here.
And then, ironically enough, we have Mike Soroka from the Braves, who's from cold weather, but is in Atlanta currently, correct?
Yeah, it's nice here. It's 75 and sunny the last few days, so I'm happy.
And you have a newly outfitted home gym, too, so you're enjoying the quarantine on your home turf.
I am. For as much as I can get out of it, I think I'm doing pretty good with it.
Nice. All right, well, we're going to get to the good stuff here. And I've got 2 computers side by side so that I can have some of my questions. So I'm going to read a quote to start this off. In May 2018, in a Fangraphs article entitled "Go See the Two-Seam Before It's Gone," Travis Sawchik wrote, in 2010, two-seam/sinker usage was at its peak of 22.5%, according to Pitch Info data. Four-seam fastball usage was at a pitch tracking era low of 34.8%. This season, referring to 2018, two-seam/sinker usage is at a pitch tracking era low of 17.8%. It's 6th consecutive year of decline. Four-seam usage is up to 37.6%. It actually went down after this article to 17.1 by the end of 2018. And in 2019, it was at an all-time low of 14.9% of pitches in 2019. So one of the qualifying criteria for being on this call was that you had to throw a two-seam at least 25% of the time. So effectively 10% or above over league average. So everybody uses a two-seam as their predominant fastball. So let's start this question off with the obvious question that sets the stage for the rest of the discussion. Is the two-seam fastball a dying art? Let's go. I don't know, your first one on my board right now, Kluber, so go right to it, my man.
I don't know. I think that pitch popularity is all cyclical. I think that hitters adjust to what pitchers do well, and then pitchers got to find a new way to adjust to what hitters' swings are at that point in time. I mean, it's only a matter of time before fastballs and splits come back. I feel like it's a matter of what most guys do that they're adjusting to. So I think in a way it's almost, if you throw a two-seam and not many guys do it, it's something that's a different look, even more so than normal.
I like it. Kinsler, what do you got?
I think slowly. I think because everybody wants to throw 98 miles an hour at the top of the zone, and that's what your fan graphs people seem to enjoy and write about. And analytics loves those high fastballs. And apparently, I was told last year that lefties kill sinkers, but the numbers aren't there for it. But they just assume that sinkers get hit. So slowly a dying breed. But if you got a real good one, I think you're fine.
Nice. What do you got, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, Kent and I talked about it a lot last year. Feel like what Kluber said too. It's going to come back. I mean, everyone's going to be throwing fastballs top of the zone. I mean, I'm throwing fastballs top of zone at 88 miles an hour and somehow getting it done here and there. But I still rely on my sinker, and I think it's still going to be just as important pitch as anyone else in their arsenal. If you have a good two-seamer, you got to use it to your advantage. You could still use it on lefties. Front hip's a great pitch to lefties nowadays. They're looking for something up, out, over to drive now. So just use it to your advantage.
I like it. All right, what do you got, Blake?
Yeah, I think kind of what everybody's touching on is just the trends of the game. Back in 2015 or 16 even, with Daniel Murphy and a few others in the league trying to do launch angle, four-seamers up tend to show an easy way to combat it. And so people run away from the pitch down in the zone. And for us, all these guys on this call, it's what's made our careers, with a few other, pitches in the mix. But I mean, you look at everybody here, they've got really good two-seamers / sinkers. So, it shouldn't be a dying art. I think you find a way to use it and perfect it. And it doesn't matter what you throw. Your number one pitch is your number one pitch, whether baseball trends. But to touch what Corey said, it is going to ebb and flow back. If a lot of the league is throwing four-seamers up and we're throwing sinkers down or front hipping, you can be creative with it, and it's almost more benefiting to us.
I like it. What do you got, Otto?
Yeah, I think something that goes a little unnoticed is kind of one of the major evolutions has been the strike zone. I feel like when I first got to the big leagues, the bottom of the zone, even below, below the knees was getting called pretty consistently. And then they made a concerted effort to kind of eliminate that. I know a lot of guys are still good at bringing the ball up, a lot of the catchers, but feels like the high strikes started getting called a little more consistently. And that was the area where there was a little more room to kind of play with. So for me, I think that combined with the bat paths of everybody trying to scoop the ball kind of steered everybody in that direction of throwing the four seam high. And obviously the velocity that's in the game now is a big factor as well. But I'd still think like you want to have as many options as possible. And there's certain bat paths that really can't hit, sinking pitches. And I think the more that guys get adjusted to the high heater, the more vulnerable they will be for the low two seam.
And I think Soroka is kind of like a good one to wrap this question up, Mike, because you were drafted most recently. You were a 2015 draft, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So, and you threw both a two and a four seam when you were drafted, or was it just the two seam?
Both. It was kind of something to figure out, especially once I got to the big leagues with that new ball.
Mm-hmm.
I found both of them. My two seam got better. My four seam got a whole lot worse, just because of the way it was coming out of my hand. But how I was going to answer this question was basically almost throw this into Cap or Mark's court and basically say that I think today we're doing a little better of a job understanding that not everybody can throw, both fastballs. Not everybody's going to be good at throwing sinkers. Not everybody's going to be good at getting that four seam to stick. So I think part of it's just understanding, what your gift is. For me, it was always, I knew it was always easier to throw a two seam, and it was natural to me. So something like that was something I needed to work on and understand that was my strength. So I think people are doing a better job of seeing that not everybody can throw a two seam the way a lot of these guys do.
What do you think, Cap and Mark? You guys got to chime in on this too. It's like a fantasy football draft. We've got to switch back and go in the opposite direction on the way back.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of ask a question that might just be to the group, and you can chime in. I think my curiosity and on Mike's point is certain anatomies, and there's like a lot of lengthier arm actions in this group that certainly allow for a little bit more action on the ball. There's definitely some exceptions, but I'm kind of curious, for most of you, is it just like it came natural? Like when you threw a baseball, it just had run and had sink, or was it a coach that kind of came along and said, hey, try this grip out, and then all of a sudden the ball just started moving in that direction? Was it natural, or was it kind of like a skill that picked up over time? That's to anybody.
Soroka, why don't you go first? We'll work backwards from the guy who went last.
So my dad, when I first started playing baseball, I don't know, I was 8 or 9. I didn't know what a four seam was. I was always only taught that a two seam was it for me. And I'd literally just move along the horseshoes. So that was something that I always threw. And I don't think I got taught a four seam until probably travel ball. I was like 13 years old. So I guess I figured out a way to see what I wanted to see when I was throwing the ball. And it kind of just took off for me right there. But, obviously there's little things that you got to learn along the way, switching things with the thumb and all that kind of stuff I'm sure we'll get into. But for the most part, it was kind of always how I threw baseball.
Nice. Adam, what do you got?
When you were coming up in the minor leagues with the Braves, did they try to coach it out of you at all? Because I think some of the older guys on this call can remember a time when the two seam was really, really favored in the minor leagues. I mean, the Cardinals, when I was in the minors, were pretty much telling everybody they had to be pitch to contact two seam type pitchers. And obviously that flipped at some point. Now, I mean, with the Yankees, that's pretty much not what they teach. So I was curious with you, you got to the big leagues pretty quick. So I'm wondering if they try to coach that out of you at all.
Not quite, honestly, because they a lot of our pitching coaches were older, old school pitching guys that they'd kept around. I mean, since the '90s, really. So they were pretty happy with it, and I actually got to a point where I think it was AA when they realized that I got to have some separation between the 4 and the 2 to have better success, especially against lefties. But no, for the most part, it was almost coached to the point where I got almost too two-seam heavy, and they just wanted to see some outs. And I said, okay. Obviously, you can get some outs in low A by throwing a sinker at the bottom of the zone. You're going to run into outs. But that wasn't exactly where I wanted to go developmentally. So it was about learning a lot more things from farther on.
Adam, were you spinning a two-seam from the get-go? Was that always you?
Well, I threw 4-seamers growing up, but with my arm angle, they had run to them. And so a lot of people thought I threw sinkers. When I got to my first big league camp, Jason LaRue, who was catching me, was like, just keep throwing that sinker and you're going to be all right. And it's like, that's not what I thought I was doing. So I actually initially resisted it for a while. And it wasn't until later where I was able to see the metrics. And interestingly enough, I had more spin on my 2-seam than on my 4-seam. So I figured I'm going to use my 2-seam, even if it's at the top of the zone. And also, like, just visually had a little better, have had a little easier time visualizing, like, starting a pitch in one area to end it in another area, as opposed to trying to, like, almost feel like I'm throwing darts and throwing, like, perfectly straight balls all the time. So that was kind of the evolution of 4-seam, 2-seam, for me. But ultimately the tough part for me was always the pitch to contact piece. When I was a starter, I really struggled with that. The idea of letting the batter hit the ball. And, I'm looking at a guy like Corey Kluber and Soroka, who are starters. Obviously, they've been able to go deep into games. What do you guys think about pitching to contact and that mentality and how the 2-seam plays into that?
Let's go Corey first.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I didn't start throwing a 2-seam until really late in my, development. I was in my second year in AAA, basically on my last resort, making a switch because I was getting hit around. But I think for me, it was one of those things where I never really even considered it to that point. It just, I'd always been a coach told, throw a 4-seam fastball, and never really toyed with the idea of doing something different. But when I did it, it felt more comfortable in my hand. I felt like I could manipulate the ball a little bit better. I felt like I hung on to it a little bit longer, things like that. And then I think once I started throwing it a lot, the biggest mental hurdle for me was that, like, in my mind, I always thought of a 2-seamer was a sinker. Mine doesn't really sink, mine runs. And so, getting over, like, the thought process of, okay, I'm throwing a sinker, it's got to be down in the zone, just kind of more so letting the action of the pitch dictate where I throw it, and not really having to force myself, okay, I got to throw this down in the zone. But, I have a lot of success with it up in the zone, glove side especially, whether it be a righty or a lefty. And so I think just kind of learning the ins and outs of the way your ball behaves and things, and trying to, mess with different things, tinker with stuff, and just kind of learn along the way was what helped me with it.
Well, we got Steve. We had this conversation literally the other day, independent of this. But when did it start for you?
Yeah, I've held the same grip since basically Little League. I wish there was a better story. My dad just told me how to hold a baseball, and he showed me a two-seam grip, and I always held it to where my thumb was on the China logo on the bottom of the ball. And so I've kind of held the same grip to this day. I want to be consistent. I feel like every baseball we get feels different in my hand, so I always go Rawlings logo towards the body. If you can see that, I always keep it right there. It's kind of just developed over time. When I was in college, it was probably a little bit more of a sinker. I was a little bit more over the top, just really taller in my delivery. Over time, arm slot just got lower and lower. Now it's more of a running 2-seamer instead of a sinker. So especially last year, it was, it's a vital pitch for me. I didn't have a feel for my slider at all for a better part of the year. So I relied heavily on just hammering guys in on their hands, because everyone's trying to lift and separate nowadays. So just try to make a living doing that. And, for me, I mean, apart from my slider, the two-seamer's been a career saver.
That's awesome. Now, Kinsler, you're a guy that, I mean, you don't pride yourself on punching tons of guy out. And in fact, you even got into some trouble when you tried to strike out too many guys. Has the sinker always been there for you, or was that something that was like a career revival scenario, kind of like Corey?
It was like a revival. I remember I was always a four-seam slider guy growing up, even through college. And then first couple of years of pro ball, and then after I had shoulder surgery, I remember I was rehabbing at a facility here, and Greg Maddox was there, and I was pretty interested in like how the hell he made the ball move like crazy. So I always thought it was like some magical finger pressure. So when I asked him about it, he didn't talk about finger pressure. He just talked about direction of his body. And then I thought, well, that I could kind of do. I hit that sounds easy enough. So it's not like a miracle grip. So then I was coming through independent balls, getting hammered because my shoulder wasn't strong yet. So I just started just trying to work on two-seamers slowly and learn how to make the thing move late. And as my shoulder got healthy and I got signed and I went to AA and then moved me as a reliever, I just wanted outs as quick as possible. I didn't want to even give them an opportunity. So I went just exclusive two-seamers after that and kind of just ran with it. That's what changed my career.
Love it. Now, Blake, we got to determine what exactly yours is. Is it a one seam? Is it a two seam? It's been called many different things. What do you got?
I mean, honestly, it's a two-seam fastball. I just hold the thing like this. Mm-hmm. And I've much like you, Mike. I mean, I've thrown a two-seam since I remember. I had like a Roger Clemens baseball growing up, if you guys remember those things. And I just put my finger pressure right where the little green fingerprints were on the ball. And I didn't learn a four-seamer at all until probably my first year in pro ball, and probably never threw it in a game until third year in the big leagues. So it's just something like you were saying, Brian. It's just, for me, it was a natural transition. Just that's all I ever knew. But getting the ball to do consistent things was an evolving skill that I had to learn through the minor leagues and then even into the big leagues. You know, for me, the biggest key was Brett Boone, his dad. He was telling me in DC that, you know, just get your arm up and let your arm work. Don't worry about throwing the ball. Because I always thought I had to be a high velo guy when I was young, but I had my best action when I was like 94, 95. And what?
That's high. That's like max.
Yeah, naive young guy, you know.
Kids got a little drool coming down his beard right now.
I thought I had to. I mean, I could throw harder than that, but the ball didn't do what I wanted it to, and so I felt like I had to live at a certain threshold. But not knowing who I was as a pitcher really kind of interfered. So when I started really just focusing on having my arm up at foot strike, it freed things up, and my timing got way better, and my ball started just moving extremely late. And that's, for me, it's more or less a timing thing with getting my arm up, and everything else kind of works after that.
Nice. Cap, you got next question. I started off. It's your baton to take.
I just asked a question.
That was an excellent. That was more of a pivot.
Yeah, I mean, I'll shoot to Mark. I'll come back. I certainly have a couple more, but I want to get a little deeper. Otto already hit on one of my questions with Britton, but we'll save that for later. For the record, Zach Britton and Jesus Luzardo were invited. This is not a righty bias thing. We actually had two lefties that were scheduled, and they had to pull out, unfortunately, last minute. So we'll do a lefty two-seam call at some point. Mark, what do you got?
Well, I'm like a pretty firm arguer that two-seam and sinker, like they're two different things. I think people use the term interchangeably. Two-seam to me is a little more horizontal. Sinker is a little more depth. So I'm always curious because I think when we look at like the pitch data, when we look at video, like going off of Mike, there's sometimes where maybe his will run a little more, sometimes it'll sink a little more. So I'm always curious, like if you guys and how much you can manipulate it to either make it run, make it sink. Corey had kind of alluded to, running it up in the zone. I think Otto had said the same thing. So yeah, if you could talk about either manipulating it to make it do certain things or using it in different parts of the zone, depending on count, hitter, stuff like that.
Well, we go Corey first.
For me, I have a hard time manipulating it up and down. I feel like when I try to make it work down, it tends to do a lot of nothing. I I can get on the side of it with my arm angle and stuff, and I can make it run a little bit more. But yeah, I have a hard time trying to make it sink. And, you know, like I said, trying to get past that was tough for me initially. But, you know, I think that when I make those manipulations, I'm trying to do it based on pitches previously. You know, whether if I just front hip the lefty and, you know, it didn't look like he recognized it in time or that kind of thing, like, you know, trying to play off of that, as opposed to a lot of times I think that when I was first learning it, you know, I'd try to manipulate it just because I thought I was trying to make it do something different, not necessarily trying to do it in a productive way. I guess that makes sense.
Who here does manipulate it and shape it differently? I feel like, Adam, you got to be the guy that does it.
I mean, I try to, but it's hard. I think something that I've learned over the years is like, it just depends on what I'm trying to do with the pitch. I mean, one of the things I was mentioning earlier was concept of pitching and contact. I don't do it very often, to be honest, but every now and then, if I need a double play and I have a righty up there, I do try to throw it down and in. I find that can, with the right bat path, I can get a chopper to third pretty quickly and get a quick double play. So in that case, like, I just think my wrist angle is a little different than if I'm trying to go like a front hipper or backdoor fastball to a righty. Like, if I'm a little more over the ball, then the angle of the pitch is coming a little more downward. And even though it's the same spin and everything, it's just trajectory is a little more headed towards the dirt. Whereas if I'm trying to throw one of those runners that starts as a ball and comes back for a strike, for me, a big cue is to throw it at least medium height, because that kind of keeps my hand a little more flat when it comes out. And I think in that case, I don't want it to sink, because the last thing you want is to throw a front door two seam to a lefty and have it at the bottom of the zone. That's like the one area that gives them a chance, in my opinion. So that's really the only thing. I don't do anything different with my fingers, but I'm sure a lot of other guys have had the same thoughts as that, but that's kind of what I've learned.
Anybody else here manipulates it uniquely, or just does everybody just let it eat?
No, I think it depends on your sights. Like you said, down into a lefty is fun balls for those guys, even though you think it's a nasty one that starts at their knees and dies, but it goes right into their swing. So if you can learn, I think a lot of guys you got to learn by failure, probably by giving up those bombs. And then you start realizing, oh, I need to throw it up at them. And those guys flinch almost every time. Or you know, they swing under it like it's a four seamer because it comes running up. And then you go arm side and you always want to drive it down. So I mean, it takes a while to learn that pitch. But once you learn how to manipulate driving it and actually getting under it and letting it run, it's actually a lot of fun.
Of the guys on this call, I think Steve, Corey, and Mike are the only three. I mean, Kent, I know you'll throw it occasionally, but for the most part, those three are the only ones that also will throw a four seam a considerable chunk of the time. Anybody else that does it?
Just the Freddie Freeman.
For you guys that throw both, is there a markedly different thought process? Because I know, like, Mike, you and Mark will pull some of this stuff up later, but like, Mark, your spin axis is markedly different, obviously, on a four seam and a two seam. You differentiate them really, really well. Is that something that you're aware of, or for you, is it just how you get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that kind of really had to work on these last couple of years, and that's all we've been really trying to do is, you know, kind of going back to the last question on how we can shape the ball to different hitters. But arm side, I seem to everything runs a little more. I don't have to try as hard. Obviously, it's easier to get to that side. But going in on a righty is always going to be easy because you don't care if it sinks or runs, as long as it's, I mean, down or in enough to where it's either on their hands or below the zone. But to a lefty, I kind of, like Brandon said, trial and error, was trying to keep bringing them back. You know, I know Corey knows this because Allard told him, but we used to watch video on him do that inside the lefties all day. I kept trying and I kept giving up bombs. So we went with the four seamer. We're trying to get in on hands that way. Then maybe, like Brandon said, try and get under it. Try and let it come back from front hip instead of down and in.
What about you, Steve? I know that four seam has become a weapon for you, you know, in the last couple of years, especially like you said, when the slider wasn't exactly what you wanted it to be. Is it for you a massively different thought process throwing the two?
Yeah, it's pretty different. I'm almost thinking cutter from my arm slot. And when I'm able to do that, I actually can manipulate the baseball to where it stays more straight as opposed to taking off. And I think it just happened over time. You just kind of learn just through your throwing program and stuff like that. I remember one time I had a hard time throwing four seamers up to righties because I kept hitting him in the head. So I had to like figure something out. Like I can't keep dotting these guys 0-2 in the back of the head, you know. So I learned to kind of manipulate the ball in my hand. I just think backspin cutter, and somehow I've just been able to find a way to, you know, keep it from running so much. Sometimes it's not bad though. When lefties are up there, I want it to take off and run up and out away from their bat. But you know, it's not always that easy. So in my mind, I'm thinking cut fastball right here, throw it as hard as you can up through the top of the zone, and I'm almost trying to come out of my delivery so the ball takes off with that trajectory.
Corey, how is your four seam different now than it was back in, you know, 07 to 08 when it was more hittable before you actually went full blown two seam?
I'm not sure how it profiles differently, but I think my thought process is different with it, because when I threw that pitch exclusively for my fastball, you know, I think I was always trying to be too perfect with it. You know, like it visually for me, like seeing a ball go straight is tough, you know, like I want to see the ball do something at the end. And so to see it go straight was always tough when I feel like I had to be really fine with it. That was just, I didn't have a lot of confidence in it. But I think that now that it's more of a change of pace fastball for me is what I throw most of the time. I feel more comfortable just letting it eat instead of trying to locate it too much. You know, I feel like because it looks so much different to a hitter than what I'm throwing most of the time, I don't think that I don't feel like I have to be as fine with it. So I think that's like where the thought process for me changed and probably allowed that pitch to actually behave a little bit better.
Otto's got next. Don't blow up, man. This is your first question.
All right, so my question is for Kinsler. Actually, I know that since you pitched to contact, like, what's your thought process on the shift? I feel like when you're when you're a ground ball guy, you know, you can be your innings can be won or lost based on where those guys are standing. And so I'm curious, with you trying to ram the ball in on the righties a lot, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I've had a lot of fights with those infield coaches over shifts. My main concern is not really the ones going in; it's coming back. I always tell them if I'm ever going to give a hit to a righty, it's when I go back door, and if it comes plate, it's going to be a little ground ball to the left side of second base. I was like, either you're going to play the shortstop over, because I feel like if I get in on him, it's going to be a weak ground ball and he can get over the hole, or you guys got to move somebody over, or you're going to basically tell me I can't pitch outside. So luckily, with Chicago last year, they finally started to listen to me. Either that, they started to move the second baseman over on the other side, just because, you know, not many guys hit it to the right. Not many righties would hit it to the right side off me, or at least because everyone always tries to pull. But the shifts early when they first started absolutely drove me nuts. The one is on the lefties. I hate when they shift a lot on the lefties because it just makes absolutely no sense. They're going to give it away. They obviously know I'm going down the way, and those guys just hit those little numbers to the left side, and the third baseman standing at the shortstop, so we got no shot. So it just took a lot of try in there. But if I let it bother me too much, then I feel like I was going to have a lot of failure. I just feel like I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and maybe they'll start moving guys the other way. But I really had no choice.
Yeah, just go ahead and get another ground ball and try to get a double play. I mean, one thing I know Britt's not on this call, but one thing we would talk about with him is, like, obviously he was getting like astronomical amount of ground balls in his career, like 80% some years, and they were still trying to do the shift. And we would say, like, it's better off you just play everybody straight up for him, because it's rare somebody's going to hit the ball hard. And if they earn a hit by hitting the ball hard, then so be it. But if they're going to hit a weak broken back grounder somewhere, you don't really know where that is. And so maybe we should just play it straight up and cover all the weak possibilities.
The worst is playing the third baseman back. I don't know how many freaking infield hits I give up to the third baseman. I'm like, just stop moving him back, please. It's going to be a ground ball. If he hits a bullet, he hits a bullet. It's my fault. But please, for the love of God, stop playing him back.
Hey, Kent, maybe you just need to field your position a little bit better.
Have you seen my fielding percentage? 1,000.
Range excluded. All right. Well,
I'm old, man. Give me a break.
Mark, what do you got? I know you've been digging up data and doing fancy charts for a while. What do you got for us?
Well, everyone was kind of hinting around it with the location, but Cap and I wanted to look a lot at, and let me know if you guys can see this fairly well.
Nicely done.
So we did a couple tabs here, and like what I was kind of interested in was just pulling the movement. So did stuff off Pitch FX, and then Baseball Savant. So Baseball Savant's going to take that movement with gravity. So you get a pretty good look at how the ball is actually moving when we take velo into account, things like that. And something that was interesting here, actually, if we go back here, so if we look at Otto and Soroka, so like you guys right here, these are pretty similar movement patterns, especially if we look at the Pitch FX, like horizontal break right there, vertical, horizontal, vertical. Obviously, the heat map is hilariously different. Otto, you talked about like just throwing up, running a little bit. That vertical approach angle too. So this is like when we watch video of Soroka and then we watch video of Otto, like visually those two things look very different, but the pitch movement's telling us it's similar. But how the hitter is seeing it, both because of where it is in the zone, and then obviously what the delivery looks like is big too. Kintz and Steve, you guys are pretty similar from a location standpoint. Like what I would call more that traditional sinker. Corey then just flips everything on its head, throwing them up and into lefties. So this is catcher view here. And then Blake, you're kind of back in that similar one with very exaggerated movement and just chilling at 97 too. So that's always fun. So this was kind of really just to be a discussion point for you guys. I don't know if anyone has questions or thoughts when they see this stuff, or if they care to explain what their numbers are saying about them.
I would say one that's maybe Cap could talk a little bit of like the vertical approach angle, just because I know that's something you guys have dug in on deeply that hasn't necessarily been talked about a lot in this modern analytics world.
I mean, I don't know so much about approach angle as much as I kind of want to like hear you guys' thoughts on arm slot. I think nowadays everybody's talking about, hold this grip to get the pitch to do this, create this spin or this movement to get the ball to do this. I think a lot is not talked about on just general arm slot. Obviously, you can see like Soroka's, even though his movement profile is similar to Otto's, Soroka can access the bottom of the zone better because of the height of the ball at release. Like he's physically driving the ball down, where Otto can kind of move it a little bit more left to right. Even if the pitch moves the same, the arm action, the arm slot, the release point allows the ball to do that. So obviously Trinan, Britton, guys like that, they're a little bit more over the top. They can push the ball down regardless of kind of what the action of the movement of the ball says. So I'm just kind of curious if it's just hard with young guys when they try to emulate you guys or look at grips and they think, okay, I'm going to chase this action, when they realize arm slot and release point have so much to do with it. I'm just curious if you guys have noticed. I know I've talked with Corey a little bit about his arm slot over the years, but if you guys have noticed any changing in your arm slot to create movement or spin that you thought was more beneficial.
I think for me, I've never really tried to change any of my arm slot. I just try to figure out what the best pitches to throw with the arm slot that you already have pre-existing are. I obviously I throw a lot of sliders, a lot of breaking balls, and a lot of that is just a function of my arm slot that makes it do something a little abnormal. And then instead of trying to force feed another arm slot in there, let's just try to mirror that and see what happens going the other direction. And I think arm slot just plays a huge role for every single guy. I mean, I watched Cishek pitch in the minors, and sometimes guys were just getting beat. I mean, I see here his vertical break is in the positives here, but only by a little bit. And a lot of that, I think, he's a guy I studied this. A lot of that, I think, is just that arm angle. Like nobody else really throws from exactly that angle, and it just creates a unique view for the hitter.
Throw his underhand.
Yeah, I mean, it's like day to day for me. One day I feel like I could sink the ball a little bit more, obviously not as much as these other guys. But most of the time I feel like my two-seamer has more ride to it. And so it just kind of barrels in on guys with maybe some late sink. And really, like, all I'm thinking is I'm taking the ball. This is when I'm at my best. I'm thinking I'm just driving down the slope with a firm front side and keeping my hand behind the ball. And when the ball releases from my hand, it's whatever happens, happens. So some days, like I said, it tends to take off a little bit, and other days I can have that late life to it. And I think that's when I'm able to stay, close a little bit longer on my front side and really get my hand behind the ball to drive it. Those are the best days where I can get that vertical break on it.
I'm curious about Blake, because Blake, I know you in 18, everything was absurdly nasty and it was late. And I feel like every time we've had a conversation when things are going good, the sinker is really late. Last year, it wasn't profiling that way. And I know you picked up on some new stuff, obviously this year in spring training with the Dodgers to right the ship. What was it for you conceptually that made a difference to get it back to its old form?
You're asking like kind of what are some things that were brought to my attention?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess kind of like positioning of your body at a release point is one of the big things. I don't know what led to it, but there was some quirks with my delivery as it pertains to my finish last year. But, speaking to when you feel right, like Steve was talking about, I just remember when things have been right in my career, and 18 kind of felt like an unconscious year. And I feel like when things work the best, you're right, Brian. It's more of an arm slot thing for me. I'm not trying to manipulate the ball out front to pronate it. I'm literally wherever my wrist is at my arm slot up here, I'm just trying to stay on top of the ball and through it at that arm slot. So if my arm finishes like at this angle, I'm just trying to drive it and spin it as hard as I can from this angle. I'm not trying to like stay on top of it and pronate out front. I feel like I get flat run out of my hand when I do that. If I try to throw the crap out of the ball right down the middle with that thought process of my arm being up at foot strike, then typically the ball will do what I want it to do, and it has a lot later bite than if I'm really trying to manipulate it.
Do you do any drills like on the side to maintain that feeling of throwing through the ball? Like, do you throw four seamers in catch play, or if you go out long throwing, will you throw your sinker from a long distance?
I will. So I feel like the biggest problem, I mean, in the bullpen, the biggest problem, maybe some of you guys have noticed, is we'll start cutting ourselves off if we just play short catch every day. At least that's my problem. So I like to long toss out to at least like 150, 180, probably every third day. And I like to four seamer for sure. When I go back, I like to stretch it out with my four seamer and to maintain feel. I don't know if you guys do this or not, but I'll take a ball and just sit in the bullpen and I'll find the grip and I'll just like create friction and like tell my body what it's supposed to feel like just out of my hand. And I'll do it with my sinker, I'll do it with my four seamer, with my slider. And it's kind of an easy transition for me to get on the mound. I don't have to find it when I'm on the mound. I've already felt and told my mind what it's supposed to feel like. And I just feel like we don't give our minds enough credit and our body enough credit to adapt to what a good feeling is. Like if you've created a really good pitch off the mound, like, all right, that's what I wanted it to do. I've got good feedback. Now emulate it. All you guys have been able to repeat a pitch that has been like, let's say it's a slider you're learning. All of a sudden you throw it the right way. Everything feels clean. It looks like a fastball out of your hand. Now repeat it. You repeat it again. Well, that's all I'm trying to do when I'm warming up is to maintain that finger pressure just in the bullpen before I get on the mound. When I get on the mound, it transitions way better.
Mark, what else you got for us? I see multiple tabs at the bottom here.
Well, yeah, I obviously Brian and I went too far with some stuff, but Blake had just said something interesting there about, not overcooking, like the pronation of it. Something we don't have a ton of public access to is spin efficiency with this stuff. Obviously, I've seen Steve throw, I've seen Mike throw, I've seen Corey throw. I think part of the difference, like when we get into that two seam versus sinker discussion, is how much of that gyro spin or how spin efficient is the pitch. And as that spin efficiency starts to drop down a little bit, that gives you a little bit more of a sinker. And when that spin efficiency is up a little bit more, that gives it a two seam. So like Otto, I'm really curious about yours from that slot. What, if you know what yours is like or what you think it is, because I've seen Steve's, and Steve throws a really clean ball. But to go back to Brian's point about the arm slot, like being from where he is, that ball is tilted exactly how he needs it to be. Someone like Mike has to create that depth in another way. So you're kind of that like tweener is what I would say.
Yeah, I have better efficiency on my two seam than I would on a four seam. When I finally got to look at it on the Edgertronic, it's amazing. My four seam, like it just didn't. It was amazing. I thought it was going to spin like four seam. It just didn't at all. Something about the way it was coming off my fingertips just kind of imparted quite a bit of gyro in there. Whereas on the two seam, when I ripped down with my pointer finger, which is the only finger I have on the seam, I actually have my middle finger off. When I rip down with my pointer finger, it kind of enables it to really spin really true the way I want it to. It's just something that, kind of found watching the video and just was kind of like an aha moment.
Adam, I wanted to ask you a question. How were you able to do that in Colorado? You had really good numbers there. Were you able to throw that two-seamer the same way that you're able to throw it now?
No, it was challenging. The big thing is the sinker is totally murdered in Colorado. It just is. So for breaking ball, actually not as bad as people think. Like if you can spin the ball at a high rate, you could throw a breaking ball there. But the two seam, like, man, it's tough. So I would just change my sights. Like instead of trying to start a pitch off the corner to bring it back, I would just try to throw it right on the corner and hope for the best with any kind of movement. More than anything, I was just trying to go as slider heavy as possible and definitely punch out heavy. I don't want them to even put the ball in play in Colorado. There's too much space out there.
Steve
Brandon,
knows all about Colorado.
Yes.
Yeah, did you hear that? He doesn't cut his two-seamer. He picks a spot and throws it to it.
Me and Steve were playing catch last year in Colorado, doing my normal routine. I said I'm going to throw a sticker. This thing was the nastiest cut I've ever thrown. Hits his kneecap. The guy goes down on the ground. He's crying. They bring out the guy gets carted off the field. I'm getting booed by the fans. He got carted off the field, and then he sat out one day. Like, you can't get carted off the field. Your leg better be broken.
I thought my leg was broken for sure. My kneecap was in the third deck.
I got that eighth inning job after that, though.
I put the guys on a group text. I was like, this is a really bad way to ask for a day off.
Beautiful.
I've seen a lot of guys panic throwing their two seam in Colorado and getting that cutting action and then just shutting it down. It's just one of those things. It's just a little different, and not to mention you really can't grip the ball the same there either. So that's probably a factor.
Yeah.
Blake, you sweating a little bit? You're a new NL West guy.
No. Okay.
He's got five pitches to throw 100.
I thought about Colorado, but I'll just get Adam's number after this, and we'll talk.
All right. So everybody, the task was to bring a question for someone else. So Steve, I'm gonna have you go first. You're at the top of the screen. What do you got?
Oh wow. Actually, I had a question kind of for the group. I think it's important for especially the young people listening. That haven't really dealt with adversity or failure yet. Forget about when things are rolling. I think Blake touched on it earlier. When you're feeling right, you're kind of just not even thinking about it. But I want to hear about when those times where your sinker isn't, doing what you want. Something feels off. You don't feel like typically, you don't know what's kind of going on. Like, what do you kind of fall back on to reel yourself back in? Get your stuff back together, build that confidence back up, whatever it may be, when you're, kind of on a downward slope.
All right, let's go Soroka first. He's been quiet and he's at the bottom of the lineup here.
For me, that dealing with not having a two seam that day kind of got easier as I started to rely a little more on four seams than my other pitches too. I found that just because I throw a two seam or a sinker, I guess, and sometimes it's above average, we tend to rely on it so much. And kind of getting away from that for me in those situations and realizing I don't have to be so hard-headed with it, and doesn't always have to be mano with the hitter when they know your sinker's coming. It doesn't have to be that way. So understanding that I can get back on track. If I have to get out of an inning with sliders and changeups, so be it. Because ultimately it's about putting up a zero. It doesn't matter how you get there. So if the two seam's not going, being comfortable with switching plans pretty quickly has come a long way.
What about you, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. You have to be able to adjust quick and recognize when it's time to adjust quickly. A lot of times I feel like when we get ourselves in trouble is when we don't recognize it soon enough. It's a couple hitters too late a lot of times. Like days when I don't really have a good feel for my two seam, I've found that for me a lot of times it's when I'm trying to maybe make it do a certain thing. And what kind of reels me back in is just trying to drive it to a spot. I pick my starting point and I try to drive through that spot, and that kind of usually will lock me back in. Like when I get off with it, or when maybe the action isn't working, or it's getting hit around, a lot of times when I think back to it, it's if I'm trying to really make this one run, or to really make sure I don't miss over the plate with it, those are the kind of things that I think I tend to try to manipulate a little bit too much, and then that kind of backfires for me as opposed to just staying true to that spot where I want to start it.
Nice. What about you, Kensler?
Yeah, same thing. I think when I try to make it nastier than what it was, like 17, I had a good year, and then 18, I came in with, I'm going to have a better one. I'm going to have all these strikeouts. And then next, my arm slot raised, and all the analytic numbers that I didn't know anything about, but they showed me, they all just went higher. Everything went higher to where I wasn't being athletic and let my natural action happen. Obviously, I had to spend a whole year of getting my ass kicked to learn about that. But I think when I finally started learning to stop trying to be somebody I wasn't and just let my natural body athleticism just let it work, is when I even had an even better sinker. So that was a good lesson for me.
Blake?
Yeah, I think the one thing I always tried to do, kind of like what Corey was touching base with, is my ball isn't moving the way I want it to. I still have to understand that I can get outs without the movement. If you're a one-pitch pitcher, it's a little more difficult, but there's still ways to get outs if it's not doing what you want. You just pick a spot and try to beat a hitter to it, or pick a spot, and even if it's moving just a couple inches, if you execute, that's what I've always told myself. And I've found that the dribbling ground ball turns into a sharp ground ball, and I was blessed to have really good corner infielders, and there's probably a few more runs out there that I should have given up. But I think the biggest thing is trusting that I got a four seamer and I got a slider. If I have to go to those and become a thumber one day, then I'll go to it and then go back to the drawing board and fix it for the next one.
Nice. Adam, you're the last Steve Cishek life advice of the night.
Luckily I think in the bullpen, you're going to have it quickly or you're going to probably get taken out. So I try never to, no matter how poorly I throw in the pen, I try to never let that get in my head, and just always trust that the next pitch is going to be a good pitch. And I'm not afraid to throw 50 sliders in a row if I have to. So, it kind of depends on the situation. I mean, in a real major league game, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the guy out, with whatever kind of tricks I need to pull out. If it's spring training, probably be a little stubborn about it and throw 5 more sinkers until I get it right. But I think ultimately, you just do what you have to do, and, just worry about the present, fix the pitch later.
Like it. You want to lead off the next round of questions? What do you got? Who's your choice for the night?
Sure. My question is for Blake. Everybody on the call has been awesome, in their careers. Obviously, Corey has Cy Young. That's like what we all dreamed of doing. But my question is for Blake, because you had a year where you gave up like almost 0 runs. So I've been in the zone like that before, but never for the full 6 months. At what point do you just have to turn your brain off to how well you're pitching and just keep going? Or did that play in at all? How good you were doing?
the funny thing for me is early in the season, my numbers were, if you look analytically, it was insane. Like how had I not given up way more runs than I had not given up at the point in the season. And I remember like I let myself get into the articles early on, and that actually kind of like made me a little bit weary. Like, wow, am I really as good as the numbers are showing through the first like month of the season? And then I had a game where I felt like my sinker clicked. And from that point on, it was just a game changer. It was like, okay, you know, Luke Roy was kind of an unsung hero for that season for me. And like you said, you don't think about what you're throwing. And with his ability to mix a sinker in more than I was willing to like acknowledge, I would get cutter happy or slider happy or four seamer happy because everybody gears up for the sinker, and you don't have to throw the perfect four seamer at that point. You know, just something elevated. I'm not trying to dot a gnat's ass. I'm just trying to hit a corner or like a lane. But to your point, I'm not. I've taken time to reflect and look back at that season, and I remember blips of it, but I don't remember like, you know, focusing on one thing more than the other. And the biggest thing was just for me was strike one, and like I almost challenged him, like Kinsler saying, just hit a ground ball, because I knew I was getting used a lot. I'd rather go 3 or 4 days out of 7 instead of just throw 2 days, take 2 days off. I'd rather throw multiple, you know, as many games as I could. So that I think really changed my 2018 when I started pitching to contact early on. And it forced guys to swing, and then it actually turned into more strikeouts for me. And I've never really been a strikeout guy, and that's by far the most strikeouts I've ever had in a season. But it's a weird feeling, and you had it in Colorado, and you've probably had it for multiple seasons in your career. I don't know if you go through stretches, you know, like last year you had a really good stretch too, and you just, I mean, I'll reverse the question to you almost. Do you feel like there's something that clicks that forces you down that like, hey, I found that sinker that I'm looking for, and now I don't even have to think about it. It just happens. Or is there something that clicks for you in the season that makes it unconscious for you?
Well, I think for me, I mean, the trick is it's all mental. Whenever I'm pitching poorly, I always tell myself that's when I'll like buy into the analytics a little bit. Like, well, I'm not this bad, so I'll regress back to some sort of mean here. But when you're dealing, I think that's kind of not what you want to go to. You want to think like, well, I'm due to give up some runs here or whatever. I think that's when you try to play a game with yourself, like how many in a row can I go and give up a zero, you know, put a zero up there. So I think the tough thing is just how hard it is mentally. I think, you know, when you're in a game 60, 70 times a year, or if you're a starter and you're pitching inning number 180 or whatever in a year, it's very easy to just lose that focus for a hot second, let a guy on base, and then it kind of snowballs. And I think, you know, the psychology of it is what I'm mostly interested in with most of the guys. Is like when you're rolling, like, does the fact that it's not going to last forever ever creep in, or do you guys kind of wait for it to happen before you worry about that?
I feel like Corey's a good guy to answer that. Like 14 and 17, like both of those years, it was much watched because you felt like you could go out and throw a no-hitter anytime out there. Like, did you have that? It's especially on a 5-day rotation where you have 4 days to think about it.
I think that I try to trick myself or convince myself, depending on, you know, which way we're trending. If things aren't the way I want them to be, then yeah, I'm gonna try to convince myself that, you know, this isn't the way it's gonna stay. You know, eventually it's gonna even out, or you're gonna figure out what feels off, things like that. But then vice versa, if it feels like everything's clicking, you know, I kind of try to create even more of that sense of confidence of just that, you know, I feel like I can do whatever I want with it. I feel like I can put it wherever I want. And so, you know, the guys that are up there hitting, they don't have a chance. So I think trying to, in both ways, I think work to create more confidence, but either riding the highs or kind of saying when it doesn't feel as good, you know, it has to even out.
Nice. All right, you got next question. What'd you bring?
I got one for everybody actually, and it's more of a. I'm curious to hear what different guys' thoughts are on this. Like, so if we're thinking about a two-seamer, for me the toughest place to throw my two-seamer is arm side with a lefty hitting. I feel like I can front hip them, but for me, not having the visual of the hitter to start it at, and I'm starting it over the plate, to throw it. That's a tougher for me to buy into mentally. So I was just curious if anybody else has anything that, mindset that they change throwing a two-seamer to a lefty that's, arm side as opposed to glove side.
I think for me, I have to trick myself into thinking I've tried two different things, and both have worked in their own respect. Sometimes one doesn't, so I revert to the other. But I trick myself to see where a righty would stand, because maybe you have no problem also throwing a sinker down and into a righty and hitting the exact spot that you want every time. Like, that's an unconscious pitch to me. It's a pitch that I can execute more often than not. So if I can visualize a righty standing in the box, another way is just trying to throw the sinker on the plate over the middle. So if I try to drive it just at the bottom of the zone to sink and touch the plate, more times than not, this is just for me, it'll end up in that quadrant where it's strike to ball. And I've noticed lefties tend to commit to a pitch that stays more middle to in as opposed to away and off, especially on the sinker.
What do you got, Kinsler?
Are we talking about arm side to a lefty or going in on a lefty?
Away. So arm side.
Away to a lefty. So yeah, same thing. I always try to think I want to give him the best chance to swing to where he's going to have to think he can basically try to lift. So I'm always trying to think, I don't want the catcher. Sometimes the catchers get a little too far out there, and it's always like borderline ball to ball. And I always try to go on that side to a lefty. I want them just on that outer quadrant. And I'm just trying to think of just reaching, like almost like a change up, get good extension, just letting that thing just look as great as it can to him, and where he just wants to lift. So I don't try to do too much, but I definitely always try to give it a chance just to be on the plate. Because if I'm off the play, then my changeup's not very good either. So I'm always just trying to give them. I really don't care if they hit it at all. I just want to put it on the plate where they have to commit.
Steve.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar with that. I think a lot of it comes from what I do in my throwing program. From 75 feet in, maybe even 90 at times, I try to hit my throwing partner in their left hip. So if they're facing me, their left hip, because that's throwing an arm side sinker to a lefty is tough because you don't want to yank it and it ends up middle. If you don't want to steal it, because then it's not, give it a chance. So if I can, master that play and catch with my throwing partner, hopefully that transitions into the game. So if I put in the work to trust it, in practice, I'm going to trust it in the game that much more. And then on top of that, I like to play it off my slider. I like to, it's not a secret anymore, I backdoor a lot of lefties. So my goal is to make my two-seamer start in the same area that my slider ended up. So if I throw a slider right down the middle to lefty, I'm trying to start my two-seamer right down the middle and make it go the other way, just trying to tunnel that pitch.
Otto, you're up.
Corey, do you think it's just because there's all that room over there?
Yeah, I think it seems like there's, an entire world full of room to the other side. There's no, like if you go into a lefty with a two-seam, I feel like, you can start at him, then you're bringing it back to the zone. And it's not having that same visual to the other side that gives me trouble.
But looking at sorry to interrupt, looking at your whatever analytic, your vertical break is really good. The thing actually sinks more than you think, even though you think it runs, but it looks like it sinks. So I think you got plenty of room on the plate with that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Otto.
No, it's all good. I just think I have the same problem. I have a really hard time, like when the chips are down and that's the right pitch to throw, to stick it and keep it on the plate. I can throw a running two-seam off the plate all day for the chase, but it's just tricky to keep it on the plate. I try to aim more like middle of the catcher's chest or like on his opposite arm if he's too far off the plate, like some of these guys were saying. But something about having that room out there seems to make the difference in a negative way.
Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, that's actually the pitch really to lefties that I've struggled with. I do think having that room to that side makes a big difference because, you know, in those 0-0, 1-0 counts when you're trying to get either strike one or you're trying to get back in a count, my natural miss is going to be over the plate because I want to get that strike. You know, the last thing I want to do is nibble, and I'm down 2-0, 3-1, and then I have to come over with something else. So I think that's tough for me for sure. But what Blake said, honestly, about trying to make that pitch look a lot better to a lefty, that's something I never really heard before, and something that I think I'll get a kick out of trying because, you know, it's almost an accident sometimes when you hook one of those two seams or sinkers, and then ends up down and in, or even changeups too. It works the same way. And it looks so good to them with that middle in almost. And, you know, they try and lift it. So that's interesting. But, yeah, that's what I got.
You got the next question too, Mike.
So I'm actually, you know, back to Blake with this one. You know, and honestly, Corey too can pipe in because this might have more to do with starting too. But the most frustrating thing for me is executing a good pitch, a good sinker at the very bottom of the zone, and have it be 2 inches below the zone. Guy doesn't swing, call the ball. And that's something that's frustrating because you just executed your perfect pitch. You wanted him to swing. And, you know, he might be taking an approach because it's probably the approach I'd take if I were facing you. I just wouldn't swing. I'm not going to try and hit that. I'm going to hope that it sinks below the zone, and, you know, I'm going to keep my thumb. So how do you kind of combat being able to know when a guy doesn't want to swing at that pitch, or, you know, you're going to be able to steal a strike with your slider, and basically get past the fact that, you know, he doesn't want to hit that pitch, or he's just going to leave it?
Well, I think back to why my 2018 and was such a good year for me is like when you get strike one with that sinker at the bottom of the zone, they have to be ready for anything close. So you if you execute that good pitch that's just below the zone and you think it's a borderline strike or they didn't swing and that was your ground ball pitch, I say just keep throwing it because they know they're going to get in at some point. You know, they might even be thinking, dang, that was too close to take, or I'm going to take till he throws one a strike anyways. A story for me, situationally too, dictates a lot of it. And when in 2015, I remember facing Michael Kadire in New York, and he took like 3 like bastard sinkers that were strikes to balls, and there was runners on first and third, and it was we were up by 1 run, I think, and he took 1 strike. It was like 3-1. I threw another one that was really good, and I was ticked off. I was like, how's this guy not swinging? He's a righty. Like, I eat him up every time I faced him. And after the game, Matt Lecroy, my bullpen coach, told me he knew Kadire and had asked him, like, hey, how you taking those pitches? He's like, I'm not hitting a ground ball double play to end a rally inning. So he's got to either strike me out or I'm walking. So you have to understand sometimes in a situation, guys are going to, like, literally just take, because they'll take one out knowing the guy behind them might have a better chance of facing you, aka maybe, I don't know, lefty, if your numbers and splits aren't the greatest, or if a righty has seen you well. Like, that's what that situation was, and it just left me scratching my head. So when I dictated the count and went after the guy with strike one and forced him to be on the aggressive side, that's when those pitches don't become takes.
Do you think it's extra frustrating, Mike? Because, I mean, you've thrown to Tyler Flowers a lot, who's one of the, like, absolute best receivers in the game. Like, you're going to steal the most strikes at the bottom of the zone compared to any other spot. Like, because you know that if you think it was 2 inches below, it was actually probably 4 inches, and he made it closer than it was.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for the other guys on this call, like Corey, you've thrown to both Gomes and Perez before you moved on from Cleveland. Like, I don't know if you guys, especially guys who tend to throw more sinkers than balls that run, like, are there certain cues that you want, or things that you want your catchers to do to try to get that called strike at the bottom of the zone? Like, have you struggled with that in certain times? Otto, maybe you go first. I know this is a big topic of conversation for our organization right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be certain areas that, for me, the catcher setup is more about the visual for me. Like, I want them to be in an area where it's going to help me understand where to start the pitch, to end the pitch. think though, when a guy takes a really close pitch, I usually think that reveals a lot about what they're looking at. Hitters these days, they tend to pick a lane where if it doesn't come out of a certain lane, they're not swinging because they want to get their A swing off. So they got to be a little more selective about when they're going to take their big hack. So I try to look at it like that. Like sometimes I throw a great slider right off the corner to a righty. It's like broke across the whole plate. The guy spits on it. And I used to get really, really frustrated. But usually it just tells me, okay, he's vulnerable to backdoor two seam. Like he's making the ball start way in on him. So it's just little things like that I think ultimately you try to learn from.
How about you, Kinsler? Like, do you have certain like requests for catchers with the way that you pitch at the bottom of the zone?
Yeah, one is like you said, visual. Me going back. What the hell are you laughing at?
No comment.
These guys are like an old married couple.
I like that. I gotta see the catchers outside. I mean, especially if I'm going backdoor, I always tell them just get out there, let me see you. I think most of us are probably. That was going to be my question: does everyone throw to a spot, or they just throw to an area? So, one, I want to tell catchers is always let me try to see you. If we're going out there or going in, let me see you in there. I don't want you to be on the plate. And if we're going down the zone, just stick it down, or don't try to bring it up and make it look like we just threw a ball to a strike.
What do you got, Blake?
So for me, I'm actually a little bit different than Kent's in this regards. I don't probably control my sinker as much as I would like to. I usually just throw it to halves and work the bottom of the zone. And so I would rather the catcher just sit up early in the count, middle, and lean one way or the other. Because I don't know how many times I've probably yanked a sinker that's outer third, and it gets called for a ball because the catcher is set up more in the sinker pocket to a righty. And so I would rather a catcher set up middle and just kind of like shade one way or the other as the ball's tracking in. And then with two strikes, they can start straddling a corner, and I can work on being more fine or expanding into a sinker hole. But I'm not too particular. As long as they can keep that bottom of the zone with their glove, it helps us out. But just mainly right on the plate and shade.
The beauty of throwing 90, 99, huh? Just sit on the plate, dude. Don't throw it over there.
Who's got a question they haven't used yet? I know we've had a few. I know there's some.
I had one actually.
Go to it.
I don't know how many of you guys really thrive on the front hip sinker. I've had it at points in my career, but over the past probably 3 years, I haven't really utilized it as a weapon. So what's really a focus for driving it instead of guiding it? I try to throw the crap out, I end up cutting it over there or yanking it. One thing I try to remember is when I tried throwing it at a lefty shoulder, I usually had better success, but I have a hard time finding a good lane. I know down and in, like you were saying earlier, Ken, isn't great. So what's a focus for you guys on trying to drive and execute a two-seamer / sinker into a lefty?
I think Kluber first on this one.
Yeah, he does it with his eyes closed.
Yeah, I think that, it's, for me, it's not so much just against the lefty, but it's taking that same pitch that I throw away to a righty. We're talking about catchers setting up, and I think Jan and I learned that, when we were trying to go away to a righty when we were way up in the count or something, if he set up where he wanted and then he gave that lean to the side, like brought it back as the pitch was coming, like when he'd give that lean, that visual to me of getting way out there with it, it almost helped me to get through the ball more, and I get more action on it that way. And I think I learned that, taking that same visual with a lefty, and, if I'm trying to front hip a lefty, I'm literally trying to throw it at his ribs. And, I know that if I start it at his ribs, it's going to come back. I'm not going to hit him in the ribs, but, it's, if I don't try to start it that far out there, those are usually the ones that tend to leak back middle for me. So it's just kind of taking that trust that, that is my starting point, and it's going to end up from there.
What about you, Otto?
Yeah, if I stay closed, maybe even like a hair longer than normal, I think it usually helps me avoid the cutting the ball off scenario. Like just try to ride and not fly open with my lead shoulder as late as, I try to keep that closed as late as possible. And also, like, I just think, like I said before, throw it a little higher. When I throw the ball a little higher, I tend to stay inside it really well, and it kind of comes back. It's harder for me to throw the sinker into the righties that all you guys do, because I know it's going to run, and I'm afraid I'm going to hit the guy 0-2 or something and give him a free base. So that's when I end up aiming the ball a little too much probably. But on this pitch, I really don't ever think I'm going to hit him. I think that's kind of what gives me the freedom.
So briefly, real quick, on what you guys have touched on, is it more of like trusting your line with your body to the inside edge instead of like, because sometimes I feel like I try to like reach out front to get that lane, and do you change your stride like just a couple inches trying to drive in?
Let me say one more thing about this. The other thing is, the pitch doesn't necessarily have to be a ball out of your hand. It just has to look like it's heading that direction. Like Corey throws crossbody, I throw crossbody. I'm not sure that the ball ever, it might look like it from a slanted camera angle, but I'm not sure if the ball is ever truly well off the plate before it comes back. It's just more so that it looks like it's headed that way. Mm-hmm. And so the hitter reads that and immediately thinks, oh, that's at me. And then by the time that it comes back, he just doesn't have any time left. And also I have less fear with this pitch because it's just basic, like 95 in or 93 in feels really fast. So whether it's a 4-seam, 2-seam, or whatever, in order for them to whack it, they're going to have to beat you to the spot. And it's just tough to get beat to the spot when they initially read ball out of your hand. So I think this is a pitch, like it is a tricky one. You have to practice it a lot, but you should have a lot of freedom to just kind of go for it without any consequences.
Okay.
What do you got on that, Mike? I'm curious because that's a pitch that I've seen you execute at times and other times not.
I'm enjoying these answers because I think I'm going to try all these things in my bullpen tomorrow. Because that's a pitch for me that I have struggled with, mainly because, like I said earlier, I got no problem making things run or sink arm side, but as soon as I go glove side, it almost seems to be sinker only. Like it just wants to go straight down. I went through a bout, and I think it was double A. I was trying to go up and in on guys and bring it back, and like I said, it was either I'd pull it down and it would be a bomb, or I'd cut it and I'd hit him in the ribs. So I think that was a pitch for me that I kind of gave up on that year. Started focusing on a couple other things, and like you said, that is a tough pitch, especially kind of if you want to talk about arm angle too, being up higher and not trying to guide that ball in and manipulate it to come back over the plate. That's a spot that I've never looked at a lefty's ribs. That's something that I've never done. So I'll be interested to try that.
Yeah, Eric, I can add a little bit to it. Obviously, not throwing the pitch myself, but just through a lot of conversations with you guys, Hendricks comes to mind as someone that was throwing a lot of glove side sinkers when things were really going well, and over like the last 2 or 3 years, kind of got away from that pitch. Things were still working really well arm side. I think with guys like Otto, definitely Corey, Steve, arm slot allows that like glove side run. The more east-west action is a little bit easier for them. Guys like Trinan, can't say you're kind of in the middle, but guys like Trinan and Soroka, like when you throw from that angle up top, like it's much easier to work up down with that action because that's the way the ball wants to come out. Like you have to get out of that mindset when you're trying to work glove side to not be so linear. The other guys, Otto and Kluber, they're much more rotational deliveries. They use a lot more rotational momentum to get them glove side and allow that ball to move back, where some of those more linear over the top deliveries work more top to bottom. So I think with, like, to answer your question, trying like, it's always going to be easier for you to be middle arm side just because you work in a more linear fashion. Like you throw 100 in it, you literally come to a standstill after your delivery. Like you're like the Greg Maddux of 100, where some of those other guys are more rotational with their finishes. So I think like just being comfortable with a little bit more rotational momentum will get you to that position to allow the ball to work back. I don't know if that makes sense a little bit.
My
Yeah, for
question is,
sure.
where are your guys' catchers setting up when you throw that? Because I feel like our arm slots are kind of close, but it took me probably, I don't know, 6-7 years to master this pitch. But once you master that pitch, you can do the same thing the righties do, this up that same plane and come back. They take it almost every time. So I think the question is to Blake and Soroka, where are the catchers setting up when you guys try to throw that pitch?
Honestly, more times than not in the last 2 years has been strictly four seamers up and in, or like if I'm going glove side, it's just all four seamers trying to take their ace swing off my sinker down and away. Like, I don't care if it's for a strike. I'm just going in with a purpose. And so I've lost, when I started using the four seamer more, I lost feel for that sinker in. And when I have thrown one in, it hasn't really been it's kind of been by accident, if that makes sense. It's more or less like trying to get in the zone with it early. And, oh, by the way, you front hipped him. So it's not something I'm trying to do. But predominantly it's been four seamers. So that's why I'm looking for guidance from, you guys on where you're necessarily aiming to try to get that.
When you throw it, do you feel like it's set? Like, I always feel like, I don't know, whoever guys feel like when you throw that pitch, you got like one shot. Like, it has to be set up to do it, to punch him out. So it's like, as soon as he's set up for it, you just aim, just throw it. Get the catcher in there. You don't got to be fine. You just basically throw it at him. The guy's going to flinch because you're throwing so many sinkers down away and they're leaning over. Every time those go change up down away and sinker down away, the guys, all I got to do is start anything over there and they just flinch to where you don't have to be fine. I think if you set them up to get to that pitch, you feel really confident. Like, I got him. All I got to do is just let this work. Just let it happen. I've seen Corey feel like I did that a bunch against Minnesota. I was like, oh shit, here comes the front hip. There it is. And it's not even, sometimes it's right down the middle, but these guys are aiming, they're all leaning over the plate.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think as far as looking, it's kind of an easy sight when you're trying to do it to a righty. And this kind of goes into what Cap was saying and a lot of what we were working to. I think with a righty up, I think it's easy to stay a little more rotational because you feel like you have room to breathe. And like you said, when you go into that one shot, I got one shot to go in and bring it back. I try and maybe be a little too perfect, and I'm really trying to make it kind of stick in. So like I said, it's going to be fun to be able to try to really work in and up. Because I'm sure when Corey throws that pitch up and in on lefties, it probably looks like it's coming right at him out of the hand. So maybe that's just something I got to think about is what it looks like to them as opposed to actually trying to get over there to throw it inside on them.
Corey, I'm curious. Like, I've talked to guys who have faced you, and the resounding feedback I hear from absolutely everybody is everything looks the same for 50 feet, and then it just goes in all different directions. Is that front hip, like two seam to a lefty, different though? Like, are they seeing that out of the hand as just a ball, or are they also thinking that, it could just be a four seam that gets on them quicker, or that you started throwing changeups into lefties? Like, you've thrown against a guy like Brantley after he's been a teammate. What's the feedback you get on a situation like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that the lane it initially comes out of is different. Like Otto was saying, like whether it actually starts at him or not, that lane for that pitch to me is a lot different than anything over or arm side. So I think that gets that initial look being that different, that split second hesitation, I think does me a lot of good.
The guys see it different than the cutter in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's a good one, as long as it's not in the middle of the plate. But I think that, when I'm crisscrossing a lefty in, obviously the more that I can throw them cutters in that they have to respect, I think that the better off it makes that front hip two seam, because, if I'm throwing them balls that are barreling into them on their hands, once it comes off that plane just a little bit closer to them, I think that their initial read on it is that, that's going to break into me, or that one's not the one that's going to hang out over the plate, and I'm going to try to hammer it.
I like it. Who hasn't gotten their question answered so far? I'm trying to remember who hasn't. I know Mark's got one in the queue.
Britain.
What
I
was your
surprised because I played
question?
with his brother.
Yeah.
Well, I played with his brother a long time ago, and his brother was talking about. I was like, "How did he learn it?" And he said, well, "He's actually trying to learn a cutter," which Otto basically was saying it is a cutter. He said he was trying to learn a cutter and it just kept sinking. I just want to know how the hell that came about, or if that's true.
I feel like Otto, you probably had this conversation in the bullpen 500 times, haven't you?
Yeah, he throws from like a really high angle, and he pronates super early naturally on everything. And so his cutter grip, like his fingers aren't even on any seam. And so it kind of just like squirts out, and it's kind of like a backed up cutter. Every pitch is like a backed up cutter that he's somehow able to stay behind and throw 95. So it's a really unique pitch. Like it kind of breaks a lot of the tracking systems and whatnot. But I think he told me that, they were trying to teach him the slider cutter thing, like a harder slider cutter. And he threw 3 or 4 of them, and they did the sinker action. And then the pitching coach is like, just do that. Just keep doing that. And he wrote it.
We'll get the lengthy response. I texted him earlier. He was bummed he couldn't make it, so we'll do a full podcast where we can talk about it. But Cap, that's some of the stuff we talked about the other day, right? Is there are a lot of guys like Corey. I remember Christian Wonders actually showed me like this video 15,000 different times of it was when high speed cameras were just becoming sexy and becoming part of like the actual on air footage that every fan saw. In that first game against the Cubs in the World Series, I think he struck out 8 and 3 innings to start the game, and there was an image that showed you, and you were in supination a really, really long time, like more than anybody ever expected. And there were a bunch of pitching coaches that look at that and they thought you have to manipulate a 2-seam, like you have to turn it over sooner, and you were supinated incredibly late in your delivery. Like, is that something you found? Is that something that was just always who you were and you didn't realize you were doing it until you actually saw the video?
Yeah, I think that's just the way I throw. Nothing that I throw am I trying to pronate it. And I think that's why I struggle with the changeup. But, I think that's the way that it comes natural to me to throw a baseball. If I try to turn the ball over the other way, it feels like my shoulder's going to come out of socket, or, it's not going to go where I want it to.
Cap, are guys going in the wrong direction trying to teach that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a full hour conversation itself, but I think, yeah, I mean, it's very dangerous to try to create action on a pitch that the anatomy of a body, the arm action, the wrist, the hand orientation, all that just naturally does. And someone like Corey has built up resiliency and adaptations in his forearm and elbow over the last 15 years of throwing that way. So his ball has found a way to create that shape based on his anatomy, and his body knows how to manage that. Nowadays, you see something on Pitching Ninja, and you see the way a ball is shaped and moved, and a guy grabs the ball and expects it to do that and throws it 1,000 times until it happens. It's a dangerous road to travel down, especially if it's not something your body hasn't become accustomed to.
I mean, Mark, that's some of the same stuff you talked about with like Otto and Soroka. Like some of the profiles are comparable, but the ways they get to those positions are dramatically different.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as, like look at Otto's grip or look at Steve's grip and throw it and it's going to do that. There's a lot more that goes into it, from a hand wrist orientation, forearm, talking pronation, supination, and then all the way up the shoulder. So obviously a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
Nice. And you got next question too. I know we're texting on the side because he's got good stuff in the wings.
Yeah, I'm always curious with guys like you, this group who really are one pitch focused. When you're playing catch, at what point do you use the sinker, use the 2-seam? It seems like I played catch with Mike, played catch with Steve. Consensus seems like a lot of guys work out with a 4-seam, and on the way back in, they start mixing in 2. If you're someone like Otto, who's more exclusive 2-seam, or someone like Blake, who's a higher percentage, I don't know if that's different for you guys.
Who's going first? Somebody take it.
Yeah, I'll go.
Right, nice.
I'm probably backwards with that. I actually work out with 2-seams. Once I get past 90 feet. Yeah, when I'm dragging, it's cutting. That's how I know my 2-seamer is trash that day. So I gotta figure something out. But anyways, once I get past, yeah, where my neck hurts. Once I get past 90 feet, typically it's 4-seamers from that point to however my throwing partner wants to go. Long toss 4-seamers. I won't throw a two-seamer past 90 feet. But then when we bring it back in, I'm trying to drive a two-seamer down again off his left hip. Trying to I can throw a fastball up all day. It's keeping the ball down that's always a challenge. It's just a career-long challenge for me. So my tendencies want to come up and out of my delivery. Instead, I try to reinforce staying down through the ball when we're bringing it back in.
Steve, is that mostly, do you feel like if you get past 90 feet, you're starting to see too much shape or too much movement, and you don't want to chase that in a catch play? Like, you want to kind of keep things a little bit smaller, more controlled?
No, I just don't want my hand to get under the ball. My ball will just fade. I can throw a baseball probably 70 yards max, like giving it everything I got, which is not impressive. But it just comes out of my hand hot and just dies. He just loses all momentum. So if I'm throwing a two-seamer past 90 feet, my tendency is going to want to get my hand underneath the ball to get it out there. And that's not something I want to create in a game. I want to create good habits. I want to create thinking driving the ball down in the zone. If I want the ball to take off, that's where I hold that four seam and get behind it. So I just want to create good habits in my throwing program because that's where we make our most throws. Well, relievers anyways, that's where we make our most throws. So
Who's next?
I don't usually throw my two seam until I come all the way back in, get to about 60, 70 feet. I throw a four seam, just try to work on throwing it as straight as I can so that I know my hand's behind the ball. And then the kind of method I use is, I'll throw some change-ups from far because I'm still working on that, even though I probably never throw it. But anyway, when I get back in, I usually kind of alternate between two seam and cutter once I get back to about 60 feet. And the idea there is just to keep my wrist position in the same spot with each pitch and let the grip kind of take it one way or the other and just keep driving the ball and, trust the grip. I think if I try to, that way I'm not trying to manipulate the ball. I think a lot of guys tonight have talked about just trusting the grip and driving it and letting it do the work. And I think that's what that practice is all about for me.
Yeah, for me, I throw four seams all the way back. And when I come in, and I'm trying to work arm side sinkers, and I'll have my catch partner move all the way over to work on that glove side. Steve would get scared sometimes, but I would have the guy move over there so I could really focus on training my body and my hips to really just keep repeating that back door. That way I've already practiced it that day. And then I'll do my changeups and my sliders, but I really don't worry too much about those. I always know if I can get that backdoor sinker, then my mechanics are in a good spot because you have to stay closed for so long to let that pitch actually work to where, those are one of the things I focus on.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty rare that I throw two seams in catch play, mainly because I like to see the ball move, and it doesn't really do much for me until I'm actually really letting it go. So it kind of works out that I got to work on the four seam right now, but I found myself kind of getting frustrated or trying to do different things. Like Steve said, you don't want to create bad habits just to see something good. Especially in catch play at 60% toss, there's no chance I'm going to see that ball move like I want it to until I get it on the mound. So, I don't want to try and work inside out and all that kind of stuff in catch play, because once I get on the mound, that's when you start throwing those mystery cutters and it's just not good. So for me, it's something that I try and avoid until I'm really letting it go. But
I got the next question for the group, and this is like the easy, succinct answer. All right, so let's say the coronavirus is over and you're out signing autographs before a game, and a 16-year-old kid asks you how you throw your two-seamer. What's the Cliff Notes 3 sentences, most important takeaway you can give him, Mike? Ready, go.
I'd say just let it eat. Like we all say, trust it. I'm sure you're gonna find different grips, but you got to let it eat, man. You got to, you can't be trying to move it. That's one thing in baseball I think you're starting to see more of is guys that throw two seams and sinkers with elite velocity. You got Alvarado and Gratterall coming up, just like Blake throwing 100-mile-an-hour sinkers. And I see nothing wrong with that. So to me, it's let it eat, see what happens.
Brandon, what do you got?
For me, I always say less fingers on the ball and accelerate it late. I always feel like a lot of finger on the ball will cause you a lot of friction and let the high spin rate make you get under the ball. So I always try to be probably about the last quarter of my finger, maybe a little bit less than half a finger on the seams. Just try to accelerate late as possible.
Corey.
I'm right there with the late. I think when you try to start too early on it, tend to get under it or get on the side of it a little bit too much, and things it might be moving a lot, but it's moving a lot earlier. I think that the more I can accelerate late, the more that my action is going to be late on it.
What about Steve?
Yeah, I'm right there with Soroka. I'm just grip it and rip it. I just take this grip right here, same grip every time, and I throw it as hard as I possibly can through the bottom of the catcher's mitt. So that's it.
Lake.
Yeah, I'm actually like a happy medium in between everybody. I think find a grip that works for you and throw the crap out of it, but everything has to be late. I think late hand speed.
Nice. And as we've been going through this, Britton actually texted me his question. I'll read it. He said, I was going to ask Kluber about his ability to front hip his sinker to lefties. Obviously, I would do that to a right-hander. I want to know when he was able to master that. What is his focal point to start that pitch? Our sinkers are a lot different, but I've really liked watching him bring that sinker back over on left-handers and right-handers for that matter. I think we covered that. It's the ribs, right?
Tell him I want to know how you can start a ball in the middle of the zone and have it end up in the dirt.
I think Blake asked it. Turbo Sinker is asking the guys with run questions. Nice. Cap or Mark, you got anything good?
I got more of a selfish question. It kind of works off of Eric's last question. I get a chance to work with a lot of up and coming prospects. Obviously, Mike's pretty mature beyond his years, but some of those younger guys are kind of being told what is ideal, either from pitch metrics or mechanics. I think like in this group, there's such unique deliveries, there's such unique pitch characteristics. Like, what would you tell some of those younger guys if you were in their situation and they had an argument with, the analytics or front office? This is how your delivery should look, this is how your pitch should move. Like, what would you say to them? And kind of like a quick 3-second description. No curse.
Ask them if they would like to play catch with them.
Yeah.
I've yet to find anyone answer this. Who would you rather catch in the bullpen? A guy that throws a 4-seam at 98 or a sinker, and no one ever wants to play catch the sinker. So shut up.
Beautiful.
I feel like some of those, or a lot of the people that digest the analytics and tell people something, aren't necessarily looking at the whole story. I think that they're looking at numbers and trying to chase ideal numbers, but like you guys said, those numbers probably aren't attainable for certain people, based on the way they throw, what their body does. You're trying to have somebody change what they do to chase, data, where I feel like those analytics are more useful when they try to help guys improve what they already do, as opposed to changing to fit the mold of what they want them to be.
Yeah, if you're getting the results, I'm not saying throw the analytics out the window. Yeah, it can be helpful, but I'm not going to change my approach because I'm going to look better on a computer screen. Because maybe that will get me maybe more appearances at a job or whatever. But this is what it's your career. You got to end up doing. Got to be doing what you're comfortable doing. And if you're getting crushed, it's almost like trial and error. If you're getting crushed, then yeah, make the adjustment. See what the analytics are telling you. But if you're rolling, like you gotta keep going until that adjustment needs to be made. In my opinion.
I think if you're a kid and you're building from the ground up, you have a choice to make. You can attempt to make your delivery super clean and conventional, and then you're going to have to go ahead and try to produce Garrett Cole's stuff for that to probably work out. Otherwise, just take a look around the major leagues. A lot of the best pitchers of all time do something a little strange. I mean, play with CC. CC's got like a little hitch in his arm path. I feel like that timing there took him a really long way in his career. I mean, amongst other things he does, but a little hitch in the arm path here, a little abnormal stride there, it can go a long way because guys are kind of programmed to hit the aggregate, pitcher. And I think if you want to kind of stay as an outlier as long as possible. So if I'm a kid, I'm going to try to figure out what I can do physically, and then kind of build off of that.
Yeah, I think Adam hit it right on the head right there with, basically saying that how many guys do you see, or how many nasty pitchers do you see that are pretty? It doesn't happen too often, and especially when you think about all of us and how differently we throw. There are a few things that we do very similarly with our mechanics, and probably a lot of those in our legs. But beyond that, we all produce force in a different way. I know Cap loves to talk about how our bodies are all different. With a longer torso, I didn't need to rotate as much. Little things like that, and I think, like you said, just being a little different helps guys a ton, because it's something that the hitter needs to see more than once to get a good view of it. If the hitter goes up there and he knows what it's going to look like before he goes up there, then he's got a leg up. So if you're able to have something a little different and unique because of the way you throw, then I think you're already one step ahead.
I like it. Anybody else got anything good? All right, fellas. Well, I guess we call it a night. Thanks everybody for doing this. This was a lot of fun. Filled the void with no baseball. We'll have to do it again. We might need a slider, curveball, change-up version. So I may be calling
Can
you.
We do a slider one so I can learn from all these guys that have good sliders. Trying to get a couple extra years.
We'll make it happen. Ottavino, start writing your questions, man. Congratulations on your first co-hosting appearance. I think you did great.
Thanks, guys. It was nice to be able to talk to you all finally.
That was awesome.
Good
All right,
stuff,
fellas.
guys.
Be safe, fellas.
Thank
We'll
you.
catch up with you soon. Take care.
Thank you guys for
Thanks
having
again.
me.
Appreciate it, fellas.
You guys.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.